Ladies and gentlemen, we think that currently Indonesia is facing multi-layered threats to its society by the group of NEE, which are currently using illegitimate means to spread their message by kidnapping people and spreading fear to society, by the existence of extremist terrorist groups who are still conducting training grounds somewhere in Indonesia where we do not currently know the whereabouts and which still pose a danger to society. And also by the fact that there are bookworms existing in our society where our society does not know where these may end up and whether or not it causes a danger towards them. We think that what all of these threats have in common is that they spread fear to the society, that they are in fact terrorist threats that are dangerous towards our society's feeling of security. And we think that in order to combat this, we need to be implementing our own National Security Act. What we mean by National Security Act refers to the Rancangan Undang-Undang Intelijen currently proposed by the government of Indonesia, which comprises of three things. First of all, the interception or tapping of means of communication to gain more information. Second of all, a longer period of detainment for persons deemed to be suspicious, which is for 7 days instead of the current 48 hours. And lastly, on how we also want the National Security Act to be limiting information that can be released to the public, so that the information that releases does not cause panic and does not cause fear towards our society. No, thank you. And we think that this implementation is especially important because we want to reach two things. First of all, we want to increase our capacity in preventing terrorism. And second of all, we want to increase our society's feeling of security. Because the only way to combat terrorism is by making sure that fear does not spread in our society. And we say that implementing the National Security Act achieves that. I'm going to bring 2 points of argument in my speech today. First, I'm going to talk about why extrajudicial measures are allowed in comparison to all the rights that we have in the current status quo and the current condition. And second of all, I'm going to talk about how this is effective in increasing our capacity to prevent terrorism and increase the feeling of security. Yes?
Based on the fact that network of NEE is highly disclosed as well as society starts to aware, why this fact is actually not enough proof for you why status quo
we think just knowing that the network of NEE is existing is not enough for us to make sure that NEE does not conduct any more kidnappings towards our society. It's also not enough to make sure that NEE and also other extremist terrorist groups do not cause any more bombs in our society. That makes our society's fear of the fact that there is order in society and makes terrorists reach their goal. And now I'm going to go on to my argument about how we believe that extrajudicial measures are allowed. We think that the purpose of methods of law and criminal punishment was always there to be suited to the conditions of society that we're facing, to the conditions of threats that we may be experiencing. Because the end goal of law and criminal punishment is not just to have criminal punishment, but it's to achieve that feeling of security and safety in the end. That's why it's always suited with the threats that we are facing. We think that we can see this happening by how after the problem of drugs became more prominent in the Indonesian society, there was a higher increase of the level of punishment that was being given to them, even though that this may be taking away their rights. We also see that this was done in situations of war, where in war we may be facing such high threats to our existence as a nation that we are allowed to conduct measures that may be stripping people away of their rights to have happiness, of their rights to not be military enforced, because for the sake of society's safety as a whole. And we think that all of these shows that in the end, these rights of the people in the end, these rights of the people does not necessarily have to be guaranteed under the status quo. Because, for example, in the first line of Rancangan Undang-Undang Intelijen that would be intercepting people's means of communication, we think that yes, this harms the right of privacy, and for the longer period of detainment, which also harms the right to due process of law, or the limitation of information, which harms the society's right to have information. We agree and we concede that all this is taking away a minimum amount of society's rights, but we think that this is justified, because we think that society's rights can only be given under a condition where there is stability in the society, where the most threats that are happening can be faced by the curative measures. We agreed to give this in the society before terrorists existed, because most of the threats that we were facing were things like murder, were things like rape, which could be solved through curative measures by catching the murderer or catching the rapist. But we think that this kind of method cannot be used in a situation of terrorism. Because terrorists, even if they do not succeed in killing a high amount of society, just the fact that they are able to release a bomb in society already spreads fear and panic towards a society, already makes them reach their goal. And we think that in this sense, we cannot simply rely on curative measures of punishing the terrorists after in order to make our society feel safe. We need to in fact do preventive measures. We need to first of all gain more information about where these terrorists might be hiding out or where they are planning to do more bomb steps so we can stop them. And we can do that by intercepting their means of communication. We can also gain more information from them by holding them back for a longer period of detainment, where the ability of our police to question them and interrogate them more can also be higher, which is not provided in the status quo. And I think that all this is the only way for us to face the threat in our society and to make our society feel more secure, and it is justified because in the end it is in line with the ratio of the society's rights compared to the level of safety that they achieve. Second of all, we also think that Indonesia should implement its National Security Act in order to achieve an increasing feeling of security and also inside the society. Because we think that the biggest problem of the war of terrorism that we don't want to happen is our society to feel fear and our society to succumb to what these terrorists want. And in order to do that, we need to make our society still trust in the government. For our society to still feel that they are being secured by their government. In the current status quo, the government is always seen to be left behind these terrorists. The fact that the book bombs were still able to happen makes society's perception of government seem decreasing and makes society's beliefs that these governments are able to be thrown over by the terrorists. And we think that this is problematic. We think that in order to restore trust from our society, we need to increase our government's capability and make them look like they're doing more in order to prevent terrorist actions happening. We also think that this is in line with limiting the amount of information that can be released towards our society. Because in conditions of where national security is at stake, we think that there is an obligation of the government to limit the amount of information that is going out there so that the societies don't feel fear of it. So that also terrorist groups do not know that we are going after them and that they might become one step ahead of us and that we don't end up catching them. We think that in the end, the fact that we can do more measures in order to combat terrorism, the fact that we